Hey, I had a real hard time trying to get one segment of this through copyright, so I had to blur the visuals. And while I refuse to do that for some shows, I'm sure you can understand that I'm only blurring things to get it through copyright and not because there's something I think you shouldn't see. Cool? Cool. It is nice to show Volt's childishness here, while also setting up his conflict for the episode, that being his overconfidence after beating Rantaro.
Traffic was terrible!
Yeah, all that traffic we clearly saw on the footpath in the previous shot. I do think it's funny how this is one of the only times Volt doesn't just openly admit to someone that he overslept and instead comes up with a weak excuse.
That's right! I actually won with a first finish! I left your Rocktavor in pieces!
It is cool how they make sure to explore the fact that since Volt has never competed in a tournament before, he doesn't know how to take a win with humility. And I like how the show knows it needs to let Volt take some time to learn this. What's so nice how they further have Volt be a dick to Rantaro to make his payoff of beating Volt feel more satisfying for the audience.
Hey, gross! What's that? How come you're so sweaty?
It is a good character moment to show how hard Shu is working, since the person in his broadcast called him a prodigy, but this moment is here to show you Shu's the exact opposite. He works as hard as he can to get where he is, whereas a prodigy would have a more natural understanding of the game and wouldn't have to work this hard to be as good as Shu is.
Dunno, maybe 2 hours?
That being said, how can he have done this for 2 hours? If this is lunchtime, which I assume it is, then there's no possible way it could have been 2 hours. And if this is after school, it makes sense he could have been doing this for 2 hours, but then it doesn't make sense how the battle with Rantaro still happens while it's light and while pretty much everyone's still at school. So either way, this just seems like a really stupid line.
Someone as overconfident as you after only one win won't make it.
This is a great character moment for Shu, both because it's him getting annoyed at Volt for his confidence, but also him trying to get Volt to recognize that if he's going to reach the top level, he needs some humility, which definitely shows their friendship pretty well.
What is your deal? I don't know why you're underestimating me!
While I can't say the same later in the episode, it is also a good thing that Volt doesn't get this lesson right away, but they instead give him time to work it out. I think it would have been a lame moment for him to just understand here, but it doesn't make sense that he doesn't understand later.
Destroy any bay I battle! I could even knock out Shu's Spryzen if I wanted!
What I don't get about this line is that they just hyped up Shu's training, and then they have Volt say this, which comes off more as tone-deaf writing than good character writing, since it undercuts the scene with Shu. Though you could say they recover at the end of the episode, but I still have problems with that.
Way to not rub my awesomeness in your face!
This line doesn't make any sense for several reasons. One, in episode 1, he did pretty clearly rub his awesomeness in Volt's face, and even after this battle, he also does that. And while it's to rip on Volt, it does still make this line come off as tone deaf. It is cool how they have Rantaro adapt his strategy to get around the rush launch, because A, it shows how, despite him being upset by his loss, he's still trying to improve, and B, it shows that he's trying to show Volt that rush launch can't do everything, which is a nice character moment for him.
A burst finish always feels so good! Your rush launch is a joke! Now do you get that yesterday was a fluke? I feel so much better, don't you?
Also, this is a great line to make what they've done with Rantaro come full circle, and him getting back at Volt to show him that he needs to have humility in his battling.
Your fancy new move is way too inconsistent to pay off.
Also nice how Rantaro builds off what Shu said to Volt to really get him to understand his overconfidence and rush launch. Shame that they don't actually have him fully learn the lesson after this, but whatever.
I've never seen Volt look like this. What do you think we can do to cheer him up?
That's how the show has a more genuine moment between Toko and Nika and Volt, considering the fact that in the last episode they only really showed support to him in his battling, so it's nice that they get to have a moment of showing genuine support to him when he's not in the ring.
Toko, Nika, can I ask you something?
What is it?
Be honest. Was I that bad?
While this is a great resolution to what they were doing in the first half, my problem is that they bring back Volt's overconfidence in the second half of this episode, which really makes this moment feel a lot worse.
3, 2, 1, let it rip! 3, 2, and 1, let it rip!
But that being said, it is a great moment to have Volt start training, as in having him realize that he can't sit around and rely on his rush launch to carry him, because it well sets up the training-focused nature of the show, while also showing that he actually took what Rantaro and Shu said to him on board.
It's like this guy's just not up to the job.
While it is cool that they have Ken stunt on Volt with this puppet show, it is kind of weird to me how they don't explore anything around Volt's feelings about seeing this, except for a couple jokes, considering the next opponent, the entire exploration, is around Volt's inability to deal with trash talk. Just comes off like a missed opportunity is all.
I wish Dad had been home to see it with us. So, where do you think he is right now?
He said he was piloting a flight over the Arctic Circle.
That being said, this is a decent way to deliver the exposition about Volt's dad being a pilot and why he's not home.
So you showed up here to root for Vault, huh?
Sort of.
I think this scene does a great job at contrasting Rantaro and Shu, in that Rantaro is a lot more passionate in his support and Shu's a lot more reserved.
What does that mean?
He doesn't know what Dark Horse means? Wait, that makes two of us.
To be fair, someone who's never competed in a tournament probably wouldn't know what Dark Horse means, but I don't get how the fuck Rantaro doesn't know.
Of course I'm not worried about him! You think I care what happens to Vault?
This line always came off as kind of weird, because while I can believe he still doesn't care that much as Volt as a person yet, he definitely doesn't want Volt losing because it makes him look worse, and he made Volt promise him not to lose last episode, so this just seems like a fucking bizarre line.
So that Bolt guy with the rush launch is the one I have to beat today?
If you ask me, he's kind of funny looking.
Really? Coming from you?
Although this scene does do a really good job at establishing the characters of Keru and Besu in a really short time.
I believe the term is ventriloquist.
I mean, actually, I believe the term is ventriloquism, since Rantaro wasn't commenting on the fact that Volt didn't know the title of the occupation, he was commenting on the fact that he didn't know that ventriloquism was a thing.
Its seal layer looks rounder than my Roctivores. It's probably a defense type.
Also, it is good to have Rantaro say this, since while Shu would know more about blading, we haven't seen Rantaro display any general knowledge of blading yet, so this moment helps remind us that Rantaro is experienced.
Doesn't matter what kind of bay it is. It's no match for the rush launch.
Man, I hate this line. They did all this work at the start of the episode, they built this pretty good arc for Volt, and then they just bluntly destroy it, just so they can do it again right after this battle. It's like, why not draw it out throughout the episode if you want it to be throughout the episode? I will say, the show does a really good job of establishing all the flaws of the rush launch in this episode. If it doesn't find a target, it's pointless, and now they introduce that if Volt isn't precise on his launch angle, then the bay will scrape against the floor and lose stamina.
Scraping against the stadium wall!
Stadium wall? Do you mean floor? Like, does the floor look like a fucking wall to you, bro?
It was tilted way too far for him to pull it off.
Yeah, I knew that.
Yeah, we did know that, because the commentator just said it, so this just comes off as completely pointless exposition from Shu. Although, to be fair, I guess that line did come from a guy who can't tell a floor apart from a wall, so it makes sense to reiterate it with Shu.
Kerbeus' super resistant seal.
More instances of Season 1 dub lines that just get completely axed in the later seasons, getting to that in probably like 3 years or something.
Go time!
Again, while chain launch is technically seen as more of an offensive move in the show, this is clearly the defensive variation of it, so you'd think he'd say the name of it, but again, they just don't have Ken say the name. They do this bluff burst a few times, where they throw Valtryek up to make you think it's gonna burst, and then he loses in some other way, and it does get old after a while.
I only practiced that one time and thought that I was so great.
This is a good resolution to the training plot of this episode, though it is kind of lame that they resolved this after they already resolved the cocky part earlier and then undermined it.
But victory comes to the blader who wants it the most.
Cool to show Daigo having faith in Volt here, considering he is an antagonist for a bit, then becomes Volt's friend, so it's good to have him showing faith in Volt so it doesn't feel like a complete U-turn when it happens in episode 5. To be fair to Volt, here, we saw in his battle with Rantaro that Valtryek is pretty weak without rush launch, so unless he manages to stumble into flash launch here, he is 100% losing if he doesn't rush launch.
Let's review. King Kerbeus is a defense type, so it's got an advantage over your attack type.
This is the kind of exposition that they should have delivered when Rantaro identified it as a defense type, because then we hear it has an advantage, and then we see it has an advantage with Ken getting a point. It just helps keep the tension more, since Ken doesn't score any more points for the rest of this match. Episode 2 is far worse than Episode 1, with it having far more stupid lines that conflict with previous characterization, and a lesson that takes far longer to resolve than it should. But all that being said, there are some certainly good lines and moments sprinkled in, so it's not completely horrible. Well, see you next time, where the show gets quite a bit better.